Please join me in welcoming back to the stage the director, Mark James, the producer and music journalist, and one of the subjects, Reshma B. And we also have the executive producer, Wael Kadani. Welcome, everybody.
Hello again.
Thank you. So we have some time for some questions from the audience, and because there's a spotlight right in our face, if you are up in the upper balcony, you're just gonna have to yell. But I actually would like to start with a couple of questions. Reshma, I wanted to start with you. At the beginning of the film, we hear that you wrote an article about these tapes, but who was your informant? How did you find out about the tapes?
Let me start by just saying shout out to Jamaica for celebrating 60 years of independence just the other day. You know, that's a very, that comes up in our film, and in fact, it's a big part of the story because I wrote this story for BBC Radio 4 for the 50th anniversary of Jamaican independence. So it's amazing to see after 10 years we're celebrating 60 years visually. So I just wanted to say this project has taken a long time from when it was a radio to, you know, what you're seeing now, which of course it needed to be a visual experience. But I came across the story because I was interviewing Clive at VP Records, because of course he is a renowned producer, and as a music journalist, someone who specializes in reggae, you know, this is something that I do. And I was sitting in the office speaking to him, and he started playing me all these songs, and I couldn't, you know, recognize them, and I was like, oh, who's this? And he was like, Dennis Brown. I was like, really? Because, you know, Dennis Brown has quite a recognizable catalog, and he was like, yeah. And then he plays me another one, and I was like, I really don't know this. And he was like, it's from the Lost Archives. And I was like, what's the Lost Archives? I've never heard of someone who hasn't heard of Dennis Brown or any of his music that's available. So he tells me all about this, and to cut a long story short, I go to these unveiling, and they didn't let any journalists in for some reason, but I was like, I really need to hear this, what's this, you know, and in these sessions, they were like you could hear like all these master session tapes that they had baked already and then started like reeling off. You were hearing Alton Ellis, Bob Marley, Dennis Brown, and someone who's like loves that music, I was like, this is incredible. So at the time I was a stringer for BBC Radio 1 and 1 Extra, and I was like, I really need to take this story to one of the BBC networks to make it a big story. So we did it for the arts program on Radio 4 for 50th anniversary of Jamaican independence. So that's how the story started. And then Mark can take over from how we made it into a film.
Yeah. Mark, I did want to ask you before you tell us a little bit about how you then got on board, if you could tell us, you interviewed some of these big legends. Who were you the most excited in interviewing and meeting?
Well, I think actually it was Lord Creator, because the story really starts with him, and actually finding where he lived and getting to his house was a major operation, and it was so exciting by the time we actually got there and tracked him down, because he lived in that house that you see there, it's very remote and you know, and quite difficult to find. We had to be guided by his driver that he sent down to find us, and up into this sort of hillside and very overgrown sort of area. So it's very exciting when we finally found him, and you know, he's a great character, and he's right there at the start of the whole thing, and I think in his creator really that you know, on which the studio was founded, because that was the first record that gave them the funds to develop and expand. So he's at the heart of the whole thing. So for me, that was the most exciting. It wasn't really like who's the biggest star. That for me was the most moving aspect.
Well, I wanted to ask you, why did you want to get involved in making this film and telling the story?
Well, I happen to be a songwriter and a creative person myself, and I worked on other films, and Mark, brought the story to me, said that Reshma had shared it with him, and I love reggae, but I wanted to learn so much about new, tracks that I'd never heard. Some artists, I grew up, like most people I know, thinking Bob Marley and the Wailers were reggae, and there's so many other artists. So every time I work on a film, I learn so much, and so for me it was very exciting to be on the team with them, and it was just great to really be immersed in this kind of completely different world that was just very ear-opening. So.
That's great. Do we have any questions in the audience? And please remember, if you're in the balcony, you're gonna have to just yell at me. But down here, please, I'll start with you.
I'm curious, Reshma, what is it that you hope that people and the general public will take away from this film with regards to reggae music?
So the question was, Reshma, what did you want people to take away about reggae music from watching this film?
I think really when I watch this film over and over again, I still am learning something. So for me, I think it's a realization that reggae, this small island, has touched the globe in so many ways and has influenced it in so many ways. And so for most of us, we know reggae music, and sometimes it's about connecting the dots. And so, you really realize how far back this goes. I mean, next year we're celebrating 50 years of hip hop, and let's not forget, if Kool Herc didn't string up a sound system in America, we wouldn't have hip hop, and he came from Jamaica. So, Jamaica has given birth to all these cultures, as, Ali Campbell says. So I think that's what I want to take away. But also the film, I think, has so many layers. I think you have to watch it over and over again. It's one man's quest to keep his promise to his son. I have no idea what it's like to lose a child, but I can only imagine this is like one of the worst experiences you can have. So it's an emotional journey. It's a journey not just for people who love reggae, but really music. So I think I can safely say that this is something that has a lot of different layers that people are really, they find their way and their connection. I hope people enjoy it for different reasons, or maybe even the same reasons,
There's a question right there, please.
How long did it take to make the movie from beginning to end? And will there be a soundtrack coming out?
Good question. I'm going to repeat it for those in the balcony. The question was, how long did it take to make the film from beginning to end, and will there be a soundtrack?
Well, I was looking the other day at some of the early rushes, and I think the first material that we shot was in actually 2014. And it was finished towards the end of 2019. So 14, 15, 16, 17, so it took about 5 years to actually make the film. We did finish the film towards the end of 2019. It was premiered on BBC One, and then after that we had the pandemic, as you know. So we were in a couple of film festivals, but then there wasn't really much going on in the world of festivals beyond that, so we sort of waited really for the last 2 years. But now, with it being the 60th anniversary of Jamaican independence, we thought this was a great year to sort of get it out and really push it out a bit more, and that's very exciting. What was the other part?
I also wanted just to add to that before we get to the soundtrack thing. There were lots of things that happened in there, and you saw like we had to sign a NDA, and the fact there was a family feud, and we couldn't film during that time, and we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if we were going to finish. This was halfway through our filming, so. And we didn't also have a massive budget for this. We started filming it. Mark really took it on, and we were funding it as we went along. And honestly, we really we didn't take any money from record labels, because we really wanted to tell the artist's truth. As you saw on the screen, all these artists really sat and trusted and wanted to tell the truth. And sometimes you're not hearing a very glamorous story. You're talking about people who didn't get compensated, and for the art that they created, and lots of other people were benefiting from it. And so this is not something that just happens in reggae. This is kind of something that is, across all genres. But, as for talking about the economics of reggae, that is something that really isn't documented. So it was hard for us to, really do that ourselves and not take funding, because we didn't want to kind of sway with the truth. So, that's what it really takes. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and, you know, we're here now, so it's really amazing to be invited to do physical screenings. But as the
Thank you guys. I mean,
as the good old Jamaican saying, nothing before the time, right?
Since lockdown, this is our first, third screening. Well, first one in Toronto, though. We were in Montreal on the 10th of August, and yesterday in Ottawa. So it's very exciting for us to be here and see you guys. And just to answer the question, thank you.
You can probably talk on the soundtrack.
Regarding the soundtrack, you know, it took a long time to clear everything for the film, all the music, and you know, we wanted to do it the right way, being a songwriter myself, you know, honoring all the different musicians and you know, songwriters. But we are still hoping that we can initially release the single, the Dennis Brown and Holly Stevenson song, as a single first, and then hopefully down the line, maybe we can, you know, release the soundtrack. But it is going to take quite some time, so we hope that people can be patient while we sort all the different, you know, components that are connected to the songs and the soundtrack.
We should also give a round of applause to UB40 because, you know, they did the right thing by crediting songwriters, and you see what happens. You can literally change someone's life. You changed Lord Creator's life. Not everyone was that fortunate. They got a lot of, you know, slack for being a white reggae band, but, you know, shout out to them for doing the right thing.
Sure.
I did want to ask you very quickly, was there anyone you really wanted to talk to that you didn't get a chance to include in the film?
Well, sadly, there were a couple of people who we did want to talk to, but they were ill, and you know, I mean, that's one of the poignant aspects of the film. There's quite a number of our contributors who have passed away since we were doing the filming, but a couple of them we were trying to track down. I'm trying to remember everyone, but there were...
I think we missed John Holt by
John
just her, but you know, like you said, like Mark was saying, you know, R.I.P. to Rico Rodriguez, Lee Scratch Perry, Bunny Lee, and you know, Bunny Wailer, all of these people who've passed in the time that we've made it. So we feel so honored that they have been, you know, sat with us.
I mean, it's difficult because you sort of want to put everybody in, but of course everybody can't go in the film anyway, and some people are a lot easier to get hold of and better, to be honest, in interviewing and so on than other people. So it's always a bit of a compromise, but you know, we're very pleased with who we did get, because even the people we have were quite difficult to track down, some of them.
Great. Is there a question in the balcony?
How many trips to Jamaica did it take?
So the question was, how many trips to Jamaica did the film
I
take?
think I went 4 or 5 times, I think. I'm trying to remember now. I certainly went more than 3 times, at least 3 or 4 times, because it was different things happened. Early on, we had no funding, and we just literally went to Jamaica to. In fact, that recording with Holly Stevenson and David Stewart sort of came up quite early as an opportunity, before we had any funding for the film. So we just sort of went and did that, and then we had. And also, you're sort of learning as you're going along. And making film, especially a documentary, is a journey in itself, and you're learning and you're making connections, and we had to make a few trips.
And Sally, you never took Whale with you.
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, I wasn't able to go, but you know, sometimes you have to do the grunt work back home, so.
There was a question there in the back. I see you waving, and then you'll be next. Please.
Hi, I'm a huge Jimmy Cliff fan. I was wondering, for whoever interviewed him, what was he like in person? Because you're 1 degree separated from me and him, so I might as well.
So the question was, as a huge Jimmy Cliff fan, they would like to know, what was he like as a person?
So I did all the interviews. Thank you, Mark, for putting me in the film as well. He's awesome. He's awesome. In fact, I just talking to him recently, just for the 60th anniversary of Jamaican independence, and he's such a powerful character. It's unbelievable, and the fact that he has this character that he played in The Harder They Come, Ivan, was such a, you heard him say, no one ever saw somebody that looked like him, and he's carried that same, energy, and really and truly we were we were quite worn out with all these films, with all this traveling, and actually I remember it was a morning that we were going to meet him, and he was there like in his snakeskin outfit, and you know, we were kind of like just finding coffee and making our way to the studio, and he was already packed. He was taking a flight after our interview, just like go, go, go. And I mean, if I could have his work ethos, I mean, maybe I could make 5 more films, but he's amazing.
That's great. I see your hand. Oh, I'll here, and then you'll get the last question. Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm curious about how, clearly Randy's made an impact in reggae around the world. I'm curious about the impact in the Jamaican diaspora around the world as well, because I noticed that, for example, in Toronto we have a little Jamaica. We have the Randy's Takeout, who closed recently, and it was a big loss for the community, especially because at the beginning it was a lot of the music that they also play and made it lively, the whole, I wonder if there's any correlation, is that a coincidence about the name, or is that sort of like part of the collective memory that when they immigrate to another place, that's something that they want to
Oh yeah, it's a good question. The question is about Randy's and the name. You know, we had a Randy's here on Eglinton, and it closed down. What impact did Randy's have in the diaspora? Do you think it's a reference to the original Randy's in Jamaica?
Great question. You can start answering that.
Well,
we took him to where the original Randy's
yeah,
was outside Nashville.
One of the festivals we did go to before the pandemic was the Nashville Film Festival. And when we were in Nashville, we went to a store called Randy's, which actually advertised on the radio station, a big radio station that transmitted all the way to Jamaica, and that was the station that Vincent Chin listened to and inspired him to call his own store Randy's. So that is the origin of the Randy's name, and we actually visited what remains of the original Randy's, which isn't much. It's a bit of a derelict old building in a place called Galveston or something. Anyway, it's a bit of a way out of Nashville. We went there with Clive Chin and visited it, and he told us a lot of this whole story. So that's the origin. But what was the rest?
Well, unfortunately, they were actually trying to raise funds to keep it open. So they were actually going to close, the building down, and I think, just rebuild. And so the community kind of came together, and they really were trying to raise funds for it. So, we were just hoping, I don't know that they managed to at the time, but it was kind of exciting for Clive to go, because his father unfortunately never got to. That was one thing he wanted to do, was go to the original. And the fact that it was actually transmitted all the way to Jamaica was amazing. I think it had to do kind of with, was it the army or the military? Because usually they didn't get
very powerful transmitted.
I think if you're talking about did it have a impact, yes. I mean, I think that's why Lord Creator came over. I think that reggae music has infiltrated the globe, and I think a lot of the Caribbean islands surrounding it are very much, listen to reggae. And I mean, we have so many genres now that are Afro beats and, grime or garage. I think that a lot of all of these genres have been, inspired by reggae.
Even punk, The Clash, and other, artists were inspired by reggae as well.
We have time for one last question, and I'll go to you, please.
Similar to the Peter Tosh, but what was it like meeting Lee Scratch Perry? Was it hard to get an interview with him, and what's he like?
The question, very similar to the previous one, was what was Peter Tosh like? Oh, no, you were asking Lee Scratch Perry.
Give me a Peter Tosh,
Peter Tosh was my favorite, but Lee Scratch Perry. And was it hard to get an interview with him?
It was a rainy night, and for some reason, I had reached out to his team, and they had said he had remembered. I actually had interviewed him in New York at Les Poissons Rouge when he had been a guest speaker for Red Bull, and he had remembered me and liked my interview. And when we were doing the film, I had reached out, and his management said, "Oh, I don't know. He doesn't really do much. He doesn't like to." But I think they had reminded him it was me, and he had said, "Oh, okay." And so me and Mark, in a rainy night, he's living in a castle.
Well, it was after a show he'd done, wasn't it?
But
Miles in the countryside.
Hired they'd hired a castle, so like down comes Scratch Perry in this old castle, and of course he'd done things like Duppy Conqueror, so it's very appropriate. But yeah, I mean, he was great, and he's the mad genius, and we're very lucky because I've seen a lot of interviews where he does, you know, you can't always understand what he's saying, but I think if he's someone who's very intelligent, and you have to keep up. So you know.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. Please join me in thanking Mark, Reshma, and Wael, you get the last word.
Thank you guys so much again. We really appreciate you. We're going to be outside if anyone was too shy to ask us or didn't have time to ask us anything, or if you have any comments, please sign our mailing list if you want to know more about where we're going to be next. We're going to be in Vancouver on the 5th if you have family, friends there, Edmonton on the 7th, Calgary on the 9th, and Winnipeg is being confirmed soon. And you know, if you want to know about our other projects as well, please sign our mailing list. Thank you so much.
We also are going to go to Rototom after this, and we got nominated for Best Feature Film at Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival, the House of Law Creator.
And thank you, Aisha and Hot Dogs, and Jackie and Shane and the whole team at Hot Dogs. Thank you for hosting us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
So that was that. It's pretty good, eh? Yeah, really, really good film. I recommend it if you get a chance to go see it. It's, yeah, really, really good film. Lots in there. And what struck me about watching the film was the impact of Trinidad and Tobago and the role of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of the history of reggae music. Lord Creator, Trinidadian, who sang the song Independent Jamaica at the time of 1962, the year I was born, Jamaica's year of independence, and so 60 years ago. And he sang the seminal independence song at that time. So striking. And I mean, somebody brought was, of course, the Calypsonian sound, right, which was really part of the history of and part of intertwining Jamaican music, culture, and history. So big up TNT. I am king. Lots of people. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, that was awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Great, eh?
Yeah, fantastic.
Did